critical thinking is so vital as a leader to avoid extremism. I'm all done building a diverse world. People have so much time to be in extremes because everything that they're doing is just for them. If I can have your attention, I'm just going to sell you identity.
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl, Bri, and it's our birthday month.
It absolutely is.
My birthday's first. It's August 13th because I'm the better of the two.
Yeah. Right.
His is August 14th because he's the smarter of the two.
I guess, but if you go look at August 14th, a lot of famous people on August 14th too. So
a lot of famous people are on August 13th.
No, they're not. They're not a bunch of losers. But August is an incredible month. A lot of famous birthdays. But nope, is our birthday month. Really excited. So you are taking a trip, right? This month?
New York City.
New York City. There we go. One of your favorite places. So are you excited about it?
I'm so excited.
Why?
I am excited because every time I go, I learn something new.
Nice.
I learn a lot of new things, actually, and that's why I like to prioritize the time.
There we go. What are you looking forward to doing?
I'm going to go to the Met.
All right.
And I'm going to see the Sleeping Beauty exhibit from the Met Gala's theme, which I'm so excited for. And my favorite thing to do is shout out to Smalls Jazz Club. Friday night, a good 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. live jazz session.
Nice.
It's just the best. It's iconic.
Good. Well, that should be a lot of fun. So I don't know what I'm doing for my birthday.
Yeah. What are you doing? What are you looking forward to? How old are you turning?
Dude, it's crazy. Turning 46. It's 46. Wild. I know. It's wild to even say that. Chill, Lauren. Back there. But he's like, that's crazy. Like, what'd you say?
She's halfway to 92.
That's wild.
That's something Doc would say.
That is, yes. That absolutely
super
is.
morbid.
Dude. No, but no, I think I don't know. I mean, I was supposed to be getting a tattoo, but when all the debacle happened with the flight and everything, and so with all the whatever it was, what's
the shutdown?
Yeah, the shutdown. I was about to say Strike Force, but I don't think that's the name of the. I don't think that's the name of the company.
That's what we'll call them.
Yeah, we'll call them Strike Force. But whatever the name of that company was, it had the kind of the shutdown of airplanes and stuff like that. So I was supposed to be on a flight to go to LA. So a tattoo artist who was in Orange County. And, it's going to give him something I've been like literally thinking about for several years. And so I kind of finally jumped off the cliff, going to go do it. And then.
And you were going back and forth too.
You
finally made your decision.
And then
it gets canceled.
Then my flight gets canceled. So we'll see. I'm supposed to, I'm set to go back out there again. So we'll see if it happens and kind of go from there. But I think I'm looking forward to doing that. And then, kind of around here, where we live at in Tallahassee, school's starting. So, it's about that kind of like, that's kind of the beginning. That's like our January 1st, like around here because of being a college town and having over, 70,000+ college students. So,
the traffic is bad.
Yeah, the city starts to change right around, right that second week of August. So anyway, but yeah, just looking forward to the new year. Got a lot of things, a lot of projects, a lot of things that are on the horizon. One of my children are out of the house right now, going to school. And so that's been a little bit, he's back now, for a couple of weeks, but that's been a little bit different, even though he's right down the road. But all besides that, just kind of a new phase of life. So it's pretty cool.
Well, on August 14th, everybody message Adrian or write New Rules and say happy birthday and what you love about him. Because we know there's a million things. And then also, if you're over your 20s, leave a comment and give some advice for 20-year-olds. Yeah. And if you're over your 40s, comment and leave some advice for your 40s.
That works. Also, wearing some of the New Rules merch right here from Black Leadership Summit. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. Make sure you can purchase it as well. So there'll be some
message
stuff.
Us. We'll give you a piece.
Yeah, stuff we're going to be dropping and coming up. So with that being said, Bri, what we got today?
For a second, I was like, what do we have today?
Oh, yeah.
Today we're talking about extremism.
There we go. Something nice and light for
something
today.
New.
So, yeah,
We've never discussed this one before, like
never.
ever.
Yeah. So now,
okay, well, where'd you get the idea from?
Yeah, really, I've been thinking about just with us entering into, this, political season, but beyond political season, it's that just realizing leaders are facing more layers now than they've ever faced as far as in leading people. And again, that's just not only in corporate America, that is people in nonprofit organizations, that is teachers leading their classrooms, that's principals, it's just everyone. Their leadership is really drastically starting to shift, and there's more layers to it. And the layers they have to lead through right now is this idea of extremism, because a lot of people live in those places. I know a lot of times people talk about, today, kind of the narrative is like, oh, it's only a few people live in extremes, everybody's kind of in the middle, but I don't actually believe that. I actually believe there are a lot of people, like mentally, many times emotionally, who are living in some extreme places, meaning that and what I mean by extreme places, I'm defining that as that they feel their side is the right side and there's nothing really good on the other side. And so I think that, man, and I think what's happening is that just causes so much. I think it causes a lot of issues, and it's a really hard thing as a leader. But as a leader, how do you actually avoid that? Because I believe that when you're leading, you have people from all different walks. And so you have to lead, you have to avoid extremes. And I think sometimes when people hear that, they have different opinions about that. They feel like, man, me being in the middle, is that me just kind of being like moderate, being soft, not picking a side? But as a leader, you have to avoid extremes. And when I say it's the extremes you do go on, they have to be things that are like really buried within values and things like that. So that's really what I want to talk about, because I think there's a lot of people leading out there, and how do they don't go to extremes, and how do they lead people right now and lead their organizations and things like that without them going to extremes.
So what pushes us to extremes? Why do we find ourselves there?
We've talked about it a lot here. I think there's a lot of factors. It's a very thick problem again. And so I think one of the things is just, we mentioned anxiety before, and again, not anxiety disorder, but actually that feeling, the fear of the future, and that can cause some type of like reaction. And anxiety has been driving us, the anxiety of if Donald Trump gets in office, okay, then what's going to happen? Are we going to completely shut our borders down? Is he going to be some totalitarian some dictator? If Kamala Harris now that she's running for office, if she's going to do it, are we going to turn into some socialist state? Or are we going to turn into what people, of California? Are we going to allow all kids to, when it comes to the transgender stuff, and now we're going to make every kid's going to have access to meds? And we just go to these places, and I think it's because we're constantly hearing. And so anxiety drives us to feel like we got to pick one side or the other. It drives black and white thinking. And so I think that's a big thing. And then also our news outlets, our social media outlets, everything, it's about clicks, it's about making money. And the way that money is made right now is through pushing extremes. You know what I mean? Like the other day, like it was, as we were filming this, it was, the market, it was a big drop in the Dow that day. I believe it was the Dow. And it was like, some of the articles I read, like the headlines, like, Dow, like meltdown, and and it's just like, are we heading into a great recession? You're like, what's happening? But they make money. Even that made me click on it. The thing is, there's just money in that. So that anxiety gets put in the air through media outlets, so on and so forth. And then I also just think that in general for people, is that we've lost, because we're so anxiety filled. There's so much intake of stuff. We just don't even have space and room to actually think critically. And so when you don't think critically, you just are sped up, which creates more and more of kind of living. And it ends up being just much easier to live in an extreme mindset than actually living in a place of nuance.
I think that's a good introduction. And if you're interested in hearing more about what extremism is, why we believe it exists, I feel like we've talked about that in a ton of podcasts. We've talked about anxiety. So in this one, rather than, trying to convince people that it does exist and trying to convince people that it does exist, let's focus on the people who are aware that it exists and how to get out of that place and into navigating the gray zone confidently. So you mentioned that there are 4 kind of key pillars that help a person lead within the gray zone and navigate their life within the gray zone. What are those 4? And then let's break them down. Yeah,
I think the first thing is that you have to do like internal checks. Like I think in order to, and I'll get to that, in order to live out, to not be in those places, you got to figure out what's actually happening, inside you. I think the second thing is that actually, who are you around? Like, and what I mean by who are you around, what's your friends, what's your relationships, what's even your circle via, on social, digital, you know what I mean? Because again, we can be in places, whether if you're in Reddit threads or, the people you follow on Instagram, or, if you're a boomer on Facebook, or, some Gen X, I'm Gen X, so you're Gen X on Facebook or whatever, and you got people you follow. I think all those things you have to do an intake of, man, who are the people you're following? Is it well-rounded? Is it not? And we can get into that. I think the other thing is that I think a lot of times people they have no mission outside themselves. They have no mission outside themselves. You have to have a mission or something that is causing you to be sacrificial. And I think the last one is this, is we've talked about this. We had a poll podcast on this before about access points. I think anxiety extremism is created because, man, we have so many different accesses into our lives that we become so inundated with information, so inundated with all types of stuff that you just become full. Your mind becomes full. And I'm telling you, having room and space is so important to actually help you think. I think because we're so on the move, so much access, so much ability to listen to things and always be just kind of busy, that we don't have time to actually sit in peace and in quiet to actually really think about those kind of things. So I think those are 4 things. Again, there's other things that are there as components, but those are the 4 things that I've really been thinking about as far as how do you actually help a leader not go to those places of being an extremist.
So let's start with self-evaluation. I think one question that I think about in terms of that is it's easy to get tripped up when you're evaluating yourself.
Yep.
It's hard to see yourself rightly. And how do you know that a view that you have, because there are times where having an extreme view is valuable to society.
Yes.
Like it disrupts and it moves things forward.
Yeah.
But it's also easy to say that that's what that view is for you, just as a cop-out, when it really might be an extreme view that's harmful to the collective.
Yep.
How do you know?
I think you have to really get underneath the hood and ask yourself, why are you having this extreme? Because it's not only, because you said there are some times where people, man, they're like, I just believe this. We can look at, and again, Elon's a great kind of like person of this, of where some of his extremes have created some really good things. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's created a whole different industry. There's multiple industries, and we've talked about that or what he started, but also some of his extremes that he does on social media and some of the conspiracy theory stuff that he believes in, it's just gone to insanity. I think you have to always get underneath the hood and understand the motivation why. So in being honest with yourself, you have to get underneath the hood and say, okay, am I doing this out of a pain, out of a hurt, out of anger, out of frustration, man, out of a unhealed situation? What is it for you? Because you're right. A lot of people will just say the right thing because it sounds right. Well, no, this is just better for humanity. But why? It's not only what you make, but why you make it. I tell people it's not only what you make. I think, when people talk about policies or laws or inventions, whatever, it's like, why are you actually making this? Is it for the betterment of humanity, or is it for your own self, your own clout, honestly trying to prove something from somebody in the past, whatever. And a lot of times when it comes out of that, that's when it starts to get a little bit wonky. And so I think you have to be willing to be honest with yourself and really try to dig in to say, why am I holding this extreme?
And it's really nuanced, because I remember one time, I actually very vividly remember this whenever I was an intern at the time, and you were doing this meeting with all of the interns, and we talked about how you can be doing the right thing with poor intentions, but the awareness that you're having poor intentions doesn't mean you need to stop doing the right thing. So it's even nuanced within that view too. Yeah,
because sometimes, like, as you start doing the right thing, and even though your intentions may be off, you know what I'm saying? But as you start doing the right thing and you keep moving on the road, a lot of times you'll start to become aware, because maybe that right thing you're doing is beginning to help reframe. It's helping to reshape you and help you have the right mindset. Because I think sometimes then people are like, well, if I find, my motives aren't pure. So I'll give a practical example. Like I'm a big believer in giving, you know what I mean? And being able to use the resources I've been given to actually to use those to give. Well, like there's a Bible verse that says God loves a cheerful giver, right? And so sometimes people will read that and says, well, man, if I'm not cheerful, I used to say that when I was a kid, whenever I would go to church and I was younger, it wasn't that much, but when I would go to church,
I'm going to keep this dollar.
Yeah, I'm going to keep this dollar because I heard the pastor say God loves a cheerful giver. I'm like, I ain't cheerful about giving this.
I'm not walking up there and dropping this dollar in there.
That's what I'm saying, because I'm going to be real cheerful to get these now laters at the church with this dollar, right? I mean, it's true story, right? And so anyway, with that being said, but here's what I learned. It's not like I tell people discipline actually turns into delight. Like I actually wasn't always, when I first started becoming a giver in general, right? It was one of those things to where it wasn't like when I first started, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to give. It was like, no, I just knew and just kind of felt like it was the right thing to do. And now I actually really enjoy giving, to the point of the fact of like, that's one of our actual KPIs as a company is how much can we give? Like, having a very clear percentage that we're giving away, not so much in revenue that we're trying to make. We're going to say, how can we give this much money away? And so I think but that's all came by, even though my intentions at first wasn't right, but by doing the right thing, my intentions kind of got to those places. But that's a long way to say what you're saying 100%. It is very nuanced.
You said something that I don't want to just skip past. That might be for another episode, but I don't think we talked about this before, which is discipline turns into delight.
Yep. Yeah. I think we live in such an era and a time, and let me be careful. I shouldn't say we live in an era and a time. It's always been this way. I think it just gets heightened a little bit more because you have more access to distract yourself. But it's always about, a lot of times we think it's just feeling. But a lot of times it's not feeling. It's just you discipline yourself in a direction that you're supposed to go. And because when you first start disciplining yourself, it's really, really painful. Like it's painful to make a commitment to get up early. It's painful to make a commitment. You're trying to start reading a little bit more, try to better yourself. Okay, it's painful because now you're like, man, you're having to think about it. Man, sitting still for you for 20 or 30 minutes, like reading something, man, that's like real painful. If you're like me, you're ADHD. It's like, man, it's a difficult thing for you. But what you start to learn is that you have to get through that pain, and it's not about the feeling. Because I've seen all the things that when I see great people do great things, it's always that discipline turns into delight. I love the story of, it was a Netflix documentary that came out about the truth, I think 2008, I think it's the Redeem team. And they talked about Kobe, and the story that I love about Kobe was like, as all those guys were going out, partying, whatever, they would come in sometimes 5:30, and Kobe was in the lobby waiting for the ride to come get him to go work out. And what's interesting is that he always talks about it. He didn't feel like doing it, but he knew what he wanted, and he was willing to like cut things out of his life in order to go do that. And what was really interesting is how from 2008, and I remember watching this, how a lot of the guys who we see now come to the end of their career who have retired, like LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Bosh, really good players, their games changed because they were there with Kobe. All of a sudden, it went from just Kobe being there to the majority of the team was getting up at 5 o'clock with Kobe, working out with him. And they talk about, man, discipline actually does turn into the light on the back end, but you got to be willing to actually do that, because once you get through the tough part, it's always something on the other side that's actually really good. You get to see the results of actually your hard work.
So in terms of self-evaluation, there's been a lot that's been happening politically with the attempted assassination of Trump and then Kamala Harris running for the Democratic Party. So that's been going on. Yep. And then also professionally, we've been making a lot of really big business decisions. So all of these things are happening in the world. Your kids, one of them is going to be a senior in high school. One of them's in college. Yep. Soon you only have one kid in the house. A lot's happening, both professionally, personally, and even politically, socially. What do you do to evaluate yourself to make sure you're not going to extremes within each of those spheres? Yeah,
I think some of it is just really having, one thing I try to do is have consistent like daily practices. And for me, those daily practices, it consists, for my life, it consists of actually of having what we call like silence and solitude, right? So I try to spend, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes, 2 minutes where I'm just in complete silence. Try to clear my mind. And so that's important. Another thing that I try to do is that, actually reading is really important to me. I try to, every day, at least try to read I read my Bible every day, and I read something else, whether if it's a leadership book or something like that. So having that discipline there. And then, for me, prayer is a big thing too. So I spend time doing that. Now, again, if you're not religious or whatever, that's fine. But it's like, you got to have some type of like consistent like rhythm, a discipline, right? because it helped clear your mind. For some people, it's journaling. For some people, man, it may be actively like, man, it may be your workouts and things like that. But that's one thing. And I will say, because I've been doing it a lot more, working out now has been really, really like important, because again, a lot of times when you have like, frustration, anxiety, all that stuff like that, working it out can be really helpful. Now, when you start really digging into it, as far as a lot of stuff going on, I've really tried to practice this idea of being present. Because, man, there's so much to always worry about. And that's what happens when you start living in worry. Worry creates that anxiety in you. It speeds you up. And so what you can begin to do is you're always constantly living in the future. Like, man, I don't know what's going to happen come November. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows who's going to be in office, whatever, how people are going to respond, so on and so forth, whatever. And again, and also in leading very diverse worlds, man, I have to think about that because of the impact that it'll actually have, and mentally how people view it, whatever it may be. And so I have to be a lot more in the moment, because if not, I can allow the worry and anxiety to push me. So I try to spend a lot of time just being right here and just trying to focus on what's in front of me. Now, do I do that great all the time? I don't. But that's one of the things I really try to do, is really practice being present in the moment. That has been something that's been very helpful, that allows me to kind of keep myself from swinging in certain ways.
So a listener could be journaling and realize that they have an extreme or maybe far-fetched thought or belief out of a place of fear, but then they can just keep riding with it. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've changed or that they've reflected enough and put in an action.
Yep.
So can you give an example of maybe something with your children, or maybe even something politically, a time where you realized you had an extreme thought out of fear, and then what did you kind of sub that thought with, or what action did you put in place to keep you from operating out of that extreme?
Absolutely. Let's say during the time of probably during the time of like in 2020, and it was during the time of like a lot of after George Floyd's death and a lot of the protests that were going on, and I think it was when it was actually it was when I was in, I think I've told the story, I don't know if I told it on the podcast before, but I was in Destin with my family, not too far from here. We're at the beach and whatever. And man, I just got to this place where, like, I've always built diverse worlds, and I got to this extreme, like, I don't want to do it anymore. Like, I literally was like, I'm all done building a diverse world. I'm so sick of doing it. It doesn't work. People are just stupid. I mean, I go through this whole thing, and I'm like going, and I'm literally, as I'm doing that, I'm literally, my daughter at the time was 9. She's sitting on my lap. And what began to hit me, and the realization was that, man, if I quit on this, what am I actually showing her? Like, what am I actually showing her? Am I showing her that things get difficult, things get tough, fear creeps up? Because I was just like, man, like, it doesn't matter. Another dude's going to get choked out by the police. Somebody else is going to die at the hands of this. We're going to live in a divisive world. I think what was also frustrating me during that time was that it became such a political football that, George Floyd dies and everybody turned it into, all right, here we go. It turned into a political thing. We're like, no, man, somebody died. Like, okay, let's not turn somebody's death into some political thing. And so I think I got so frustrated with that, because, like, man, there's no leaders actually leading and caring and having empathy and mourning the fact of a loss of life. But what I had to do is step back and realize, okay, if I get out, if I say, I'm not doing this anymore, like, I mean, literally, like, not try to build diverse space and really not try to lead, then what am I leaving it to? I'm not saying I'm going to, change everybody's thought and make the whole nation better, but can I make the world that I have, if I quit, if I don't do this, is it going to be better? And I have a responsibility to do that, to make humanity better. And so that was the way I was, like, kind of processing it, because really deep inside it was very selfish. See, when we go to these places, like when I went to that place of extremism, it was just like, I was in pain. I was in pain by literally watching a man die right in front of me, just that there was no need for it. I was sitting there wondering, man, like, the fears of my son one day, man, and just like the worry of that. And I know some people like, that's hype or whatever. I'm like, yeah, if you've never lived that way, if you've never been Black, you don't understand it. And that does not mean that police officers are all bad. Majority of police officers do a really good job, but there are those who don't. And you know what? I just want to make sure my son passed the test when one day he meets a bad one. One day, if he does meet a bad one, that he can pass the test. But that's a lot of fear. That's a lot of anxiety. So but I also realized a lot of that stuff became about my own survival, my family's survival, and my own selfishness. I think people go to extremes because it's just about them. They think this is the best way the world's going to work, but it's about them. It's not really about other people. It's usually about them.
So you started to get into access points some, so I think it's okay for us to go ahead and jump into those.
Yeah. I think access points are the fact that when we get to this idea of extremism is because, man, when you just imagine, there's only so much capacity humans have. See, that's one of the things I think that has been so lied to us today as a culture and society is that we can, that we can contain and hold everything. But you only can, as I'm sitting with this water bottle, there's only so much water you can put inside of this water bottle. If it doesn't, it overflows, right? So here's the thing, same thing about a human. There's only so much information. There's only so much worry, things that you can actually consume. And we are always so plugged in and consuming because when you're filled up like that, then where is there ever room for you to really think about other stuff? And so I think that that's one of the biggest things to avoid extremism is, man, we have got to begin to cut off access points in our life. And cutting off access points means being honest with yourself. If you follow some people, you're not bad. You're like, oh man, I can't believe I can't follow this person, man. What's wrong with me? I should be tough enough or whatever. I'm not going to let them get to me. No, there's people I follow who have done nothing wrong to me and they're good people. But when I look at their social media stuff, for whatever reason, it can create envy inside of me. That's not good. So right, wrong, or indifferent. Okay. There's no need for me me following them does nothing to prove what. All it's doing is every time I do it, I'm having to fight something that I don't even need to fight. And so I've learned, I'm just going to cut that off. But what I do is when I do that, I'm like, man, but what's going on? Why am I envious of that? And try to figure that stuff out. So again, I think people just have to start to evaluate, what are you consuming? Because I'm telling you, I think a lot of the extreme places, and I think a lot of extreme places leaders go, is because of what they're actually consuming. And I think what they consume many times is stuff they want to actually, that they believe, and then there's going to the extreme measures of whoever's saying those same things. And so you get no other messages. You just hear just that message. But almost everything, you know what I'm saying? Very few things in life that it's just man, it's black and white. Everything has another side to it that sometimes that they're dangerous to that side. And I think you have to be very much so well versed in being able to see all those different sides. So I think we have to start cutting off access point. I think we're just inundated with way too much information, way too much stuff in our lives that actually gives us room to critical think. Critical thinking is so vital as a leader to avoid extremism, because a lot of times when you get rushed or you're filled up, all the stuff, you can't think very clear.
Completely side out of blue thing. I've heard that the level of consumerism and distraction that happens within the American context is actually a war tactic. Have you heard that? What's your thought on that?
I mean, I think that
in terms of creating an underdeveloped and overwhelmed generation.
Yeah, I think that, what's happening right now is again, it's an attention economy. And so what? If I can have your attention, I'm just going to sell you identity. So I think a lot of a lot of stuff that gets sold to you right now, it's just consuming you and it's consuming your identity. And consuming you're right, your time. You're not thinking about that because everybody will talk about, TikTok is great or Instagram, whatever. But a lot of times when people are doing that, there's a lot of informational things you can learn on those platforms. But most people are doing it. You're just scrolling. And just imagine in scrolling and how many times people have done this. They've scrolled and you scroll and all of a sudden somehow you pop across something and then all of a sudden it may be a friend of yours and they post something, right? And there's somebody and then all of a sudden you're like, man, that's a little bit sideways. And then you start going down there. Then whatever reason you stay on their story or you click on their profile and then you start realizing, man, they have a lot of extreme views. Now all of a sudden you feel some type of way about somebody that you thought was a friend but you don't think they're a friend now because they have a completely different view than you do, and now you're mad and you're upset and you're angry. The reason why I say this is that when people get our attention, they try to and do that. That's all these platforms want to do, and so the answer is yes. When consumer is 100% is a tactic to actually make us be an underdeveloped people, because then they can sell you something. They can move your life. You become a sheep. It's because people who don't think just get moved according to whatever the cultural winds that are happening.
So something that I wrestle with when it comes to access points, and I love this topic. We've actually done a whole podcast on this topic. I wrestle a lot with wanting, because I'm very tight on my access points, but then I also want to be well-informed and educated. And I struggle so much with knowing what should, if I have an hour of time, what should I even like indulge in or interact with or consume within that hour's time to help me learn how to critically think. And maybe that's the difference, is like engaging with something that is a form of maybe it's dull versus engaging with something in order to form your mind, like engaging something with the purpose of interacting with it rather than it just feeding you. Yeah.
Well, I think it comes down to this, like, so for you, like you have a job where you're constantly having to think and solve problems. So if you've been doing that all day, right? You've been in meetings, you've been solving problems, you're whatever. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong for like 30 minutes where you're like, yo, I'm going on TikTok and I'm just going to mindlessly scroll. I don't think I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. What I'm trying to say is that, and I think that you're just knowing yourself, like if that's relaxing to you, great, just go do it. The other thing becomes though, like what's the routine and what's like your schedule? Because because this is where I get in trouble. I get in trouble because I will want to consume information all the time. And just because I'm always trying to learn, so it'll be like, oh, okay, I got a few minutes, so let me just listen to this podcast, or I got this time, well, let me listen to this news. Oh, I got this, let me read this. Oh, I need to read this book. And what I end up doing is being overwhelmed because I'm reading so many different things that I don't have enough time to even think about what I read earlier. Because I started thinking about books. So, for example, I started thinking about books I've read over the years. And I started thinking about books that I really remember and really impact me. They were those that I actually took my time. I wasn't trying to rush through them. And afterwards, man, I would finish. I'm like, oh, what was going on with there? And I would think about it. I think so many times because there's so much information in the world, we're trying to consume all the information instead of actually getting information so that we can actually learn. And so what I would say is that I think for people out there that are trying to figure out what they need to do, I think you have to, one, know yourself. Like, man, I listen to a podcast called Breaking Points, right? And it's a great news podcast because they're left and right. They really talk about, they're very balanced. They actually talk about their own side. You know what I'm saying? So one, Sagar, and Jetty, he'll talk about the right, Cristobal, she'll talk about the left, and they both will critique stuff, but you get the real information that's actually happening. So I like listening to them because it's not like this side of like, okay, here we go. They're going to be on the left. They're going to be on the right. Okay. So that's one thing. But I also think that like, you just have to know what season of life you're in and what you're trying to learn. So for you, you're saying, man, okay, I want to know what's going on with world affairs. Okay. Well, maybe just take one day, take a couple hours on a Friday. Man, in the afternoon, okay, this one, I'm just going to go in, try to catch up. There's plenty of podcasts out there right now. I think The Daily is one on the New York Times. I think they do one called The Daily. They just kind of update you, and so I would encourage you to kind of like maybe take a time or a moment to kind of consume during that time, but also try to figure out why are you trying to consume stuff as well? Because is it just to know something? What are we trying to get out of it? And I think that's another thing too. And we can, from there is I actually try to look at just moments in my life and say, this is what I'm trying to learn in this season of my life. And so I'm trying to learn this. And I just really try to focus my attention on those types of things.
Well, for those of you listening that struggle with it, just know that we have put in a lot of time into narrowing down our access points over the past year. And there's still times where we'll text each other and be like, okay, I have an hour. Should I do this, this, or this, and help each other decide?
Because you think about it, it's a tyranny of choice in our world today. It's really, really hard because you're just like, the ability now to, man, I can listen to some of the best thinkers in the world. Think about this, how much, we used to, and again, I'm dating myself since Lauren was, talking about I'm halfway to 92. So, but being halfway to 92, I remember the days when actually musicians weren't producing music like that. It was every year to 2 years. Right. And so now it's like every Friday, my son is into music. So every Friday, this dude is sending me music. And I'm like, I can't even listen to what you sent me last time. And I really want to listen. And it's just so much. So my point, it becomes a tyranny of choice because you're like, there's so much access to do things instantly that it makes it really hard. That's why you have to know, man, what season of life you're in, what are you trying to accomplish, and then build your life around that. Because if you don't, then you'll build your life around all this stuff and you'll just be there doing whatever. Like an example right now, again, being all the way halfway to 92 is going to be my new thing this year. So being halfway to 92 is that like, but I grew up as a kid on video games, like, you know, so I still like video games. College Football 25 came out. So shout out to every dude who took time off to play College Football 25. So that'd been out. But here's what I knew that was coming out, and I made a very clear decision. This is going to be my time when I actually like my like kind of relaxing time is doing that. I don't play golf. You know what I'm saying? I'm not out there like I don't collect a bunch of stuff. You did have a golf era though. I did have a golf era. Like I'm not out there like, you know, collecting, you know, cars. I'm not like, I don't do anything else. So that's kind of my like relaxing time is doing that. But I worked that in knowing when it was coming out. Mm-hmm. So again, I just think you got to know what season you're in and then just be willing to do it. But it's really hard for people to say no because of the fear of what they miss out or what about this? And right. Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, next is relationships.
Mm-hmm. That was an interesting one because I think we know in our heads that like our friendships shape us.
Right.
Our relationships shape us. But I don't know if people really think deeply about their relationships. Maybe the relationship they have with somebody who's a significant other or something like that, maybe a friend here. But I don't think people actually really sit back and look at their friend group and say, man, like, what are they like? Are they helping me at all? Like, am I helping them at all? Like, why are we actually friends? Like, is it just because we're like, man, we were friends in one season of life and we all were going out together and partying? Like, and now you're all like middle-aged adults and you're still hanging out with it, you know, and you still got that one friend who still tries to go out. Like why are we still friends? What are we doing? Do all my friends have one view of life and the world? Because if you only have friends who have the same view, the same stuff, the same experiences, you're going to not be very well-rounded as a person. And so I tell people, man, to look at that. Do you have a friend or someone closer who sits on the other side of maybe the social aisle that you sit on? They sit on the other side of where financially they may be somebody there. They don't believe in capitalism. Okay. Maybe you sit on the side of somebody else, but politically they sit somewhere else, whatever it may be, because what that does, and I'm not saying everyone should be that, but you need to have groups of, you have people who push against you, not people that all are the same. And I think what ends up happening in today's world, we've become so soft to not be willing to be into conflict with anybody. We don't think friendships should have conflict or relationships. They're humans. Humans suck. So because we suck, you're going to have conflict with people. But what happens as soon as you have conflict, you just throw that person out. You know, they're bad vibes, blah, blah, blah. And so I go in this direction. I think you need to have some friends in your life that actually like cause conflict. You know, you got to see it. Like one of my best friends was here. And man, he was here, and it's like, man, I had so much fun with him being here this week. But dude, we've had so many different conflicts. So many times we've challenged each other. He's challenged me, I've challenged him, and I'm a better man because of it. And I think that's really important to actually do that evaluation. I think your social media, like, what are you consuming? What people do you listen to? Like, you know, what story, you know, you can tell like the people you rock with. Just go in your stories. Who are the first like 15 stories that pop up? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are those people like? I just think it's really important for you to kind of look at who's shaping your mind and your relationships.
So if I'm someone who's, you know, 40, 50, 60, and I'm realizing
the
that
old heads, okay.
They listen to our podcast.
They do. Shout out to the old heads on the podcast with me. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So,
all respect, all honor.
Yeah, shout out to all the old heads got to take Advil every day.
Oh. We in the Unfortunately, I take Advil. That medical grade Advil.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so, no, you're 40, 50, 60, and you're realizing I only have friends with people who think like me, walk like me, talk like me. Mm-hmm. And I'm interested in having a wider range of conversations and a wider range of friendships.
Yep.
How do you even do that? That just sounds like such a challenging phase of life to develop those kinds of friendships.
Well, I would say this. If usually if you're in your 40, 50, 60s, you're still working. And you're probably working in a place or a spot to where there's a ton of different diverse thoughts. So I would tell you this. You know the person. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's say you're the person, you're the right-wing Republican, right? And then there's you're looking around the office. Who can I have a conversation with? All right. And then all of a sudden, it's the blue hair girl who drives a Subaru. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying with and with LGBTQ and all that, kind of like flag on the back of her car. Okay, she's probably gonna have different views than you. So you know what you should do? Just ask her, hey, can I take you to lunch? If it's somebody you don't be a creeper or weird, but you know what I mean? But like if it's somebody you may know because you work with them, just ask them, hey, can we go to lunch? And then just go in there and just ask questions. I think that's the biggest thing, man. Like ask questions, and it's because we're around different types of people all the time. It's just our willingness to just ask questions and not go in there. But most people don't want to do that because if you go in there, you're going to try to change their minds. It's like just like if you see somebody who's rocking a "Make America Great Again" hat, and you go approach them, you're going to be trying to convince them of why Trump is whatever. Versus like just ask them questions. Most people have like reasons why they got to the place that they're at, whether if you agree with them or not. And so that's how I would start. I mean, just look across the cubicle, look across the office. I mean, there's somebody who has a different view and just, grab coffee with them and see what goes from there. But I mean, I just think that that's one of the best ways that you can actually practically start doing it.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons why the third space is so compelling to me too. Mm-hmm. And we talk about the third space a lot as in like a need that we would like to meet. Yeah. Where in society now, there used to be a ton of different ways that you could connect with people, but especially with the economy crashing and recession, it's expensive to go to things like dinners and coffee shops, and there's such a lack of third spaces. So a place that isn't home and isn't work to go to and just hang out with people and especially meet new people. Like I can join a pickleball team, but if I hear about it, it's probably because 6 of my friends started the pickleball team.
No, and I think you're right, and we've lost the ability. I mean, even when I talk to some people who own like coffee shops, their whole thing is like they're trying to get people in and out. So instead of it being a place where people can kind of like gather and hang out and I know some people that actually have very small shops on purpose, and they have literally crappy Wi-Fi on purpose. So people won't just sit there, but I actually think, man, sometimes it's like, what if you actually, that's what I've thought about. Like, what if you actually created a third space, coffee shop, wine, whatever. Like a great one is like the cigar spot that I go to called Fuma. Again, I love it. And here's the reason why. It's because it's an incredible space. I meet a lot of different types of people that are in there.
The vibe is just approachable.
Yeah, the vibe's approachable. You sit there, you just have, and it's like, and people, you get used to seeing certain people. You talk to them. I've had so many different conversations there with people who I didn't know, who had different views than I had. I mean, people always, trip out because I'm a pastor and I'm in there. And again, and they like, oh man, this is actually like cool because I'm in there. It's not like I'm in there and I'm like sitting there like getting drunk or I'm just like, no, I'm sitting in there, man, just having a cigar. And a lot of times what's funny, I actually work on my sermons while I sit in there, but or I go read or I do whatever. But man, it's been really cool because I'm actually able to have all types of conversation with all different types of people. And here's what's really interesting about that. I just have learned a lot. Like I've learned a lot from the bartender who's working there, who would help me pick out my cigars or whatever, and knowing his story. And he was working there. Now he's moved out. He's kind of moved. I think it's like Montana, Wyoming. He always wanted to be out there in the trails, and so I learned a ton about like wilderness and things like that. Just having conversations with him, and you just begin to hear people's thoughts and whatever, and you just become better because of it. So anyway, all that being said, I think that's a great thing. Is having third spaces is incredibly important because it gives you opportunities to to begin and meet new friendships and relationships. That's why church is that's why church is a great thing. Yeah,
that's the biggest third space that exists right now by far.
For people to actually go and build relationships with each other.
So the last one is mission.
Which I think is a big part. I think that people have so much time to be in extremes because everything that they're doing is just for them. Or the thing that just affects them. Even your family, that affects them. But I actually believe that when we are at our best and when we really are doing it, you begin to focus on others, because here's why. When you're on mission towards something bigger than yourself, you just focus on the majors. You don't focus. And when you don't do that, when it's just you start focusing on the minors. You start focusing on every little thing. I mean, that's why when you watch, again, we talk about military, we talk about athletics, whatever. It's why you can have people from all different walks of life come together from all different points to be able to actually do something together and get along. Because when you're sitting out there and you're in the middle of a game, or you're on a battlefield, or you're in the middle of, boot camp or whatever, you do not care if that person, who they voted for. You don't care who their parents are. Like, man, their parents may be racist. Their parents may not like white people, whatever. Like, it does not matter. You are all going in a direction together, and you focus on the majors. And I think right now, we went to this world where we started to produce, right? We had production. And then all of a sudden from the production, we started consuming. It's consumption. Now we're being exploited for all the consumption that we had. Everything that we were doing was about what we can consume, instead of saying, man, what can we actually give? I think if people were more in that's why when there's like a big issue that happens, right? That's why for the few moments we had after 9/11, there was a tragedy, and people are like, man, how do we actually help? Because you didn't think of it. You didn't care. Nobody cared about what was people's political parties who were in that building, or the firefighters and the workers who were down there. No one cared about. They were just trying to see whether anybody still alive, any lives saved. How do we help New York rebuild, the whole nine? And it's because there was something that was in front of us. And I think that we've got to start being on mission more. You got to start doing. I think people got to start building and adding value more. What are you doing? Stop thinking about what Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or, stop thinking about what Elon Musk, or you're thinking about what Warren Buffett or all these other guys are doing. What are you doing? Think about what you can do. What can you do to make your world better? What can you do in your city to make it better? What can you do within the context of your neighborhood to make it better? You know what? Listen, there are a lot of people walking around right now who, don't have fathers. If you're a male right there, man, go start serving, start helping in that direction. Begin to create business. Go begin to have something greater than yourself at the end of the rainbow. Because I think when you don't, you'll just be so consumed with just you and your stuff. But when you get outside of that stuff, it just begins to change things.
You know who's brought such a sense of unity and direction to the American people lately?
Who's that?
The USA women's gymnastics team.
They have. They really have. But
they have really brought us together.
Again, always funny story is that there's just something culturally with black people, and this is, when we see black people doing stuff that we normally don't do you understand how hard black people pray for those people? Like the other day, I'm watching water polo, women's water polo, and there's literally a black, I think she's the goalie. And let me tell you this right now, I looked out there, I'm like, yo, who is this sister out here I'm like, and you think she's the only black person out there, and she's the goalie. So when they score, they gonna think it's your fault. We ain't got too many of us. Man, I was over there praying for that girl. I'll never forget 2008, Michael Phelps trying to win the Olympics or win his whatever race it was. And there was a brother who was swimming. Dude, that joker jumped in the water. And first of all, I thought it was like Kobe or one of the, I was like, man, what NBA dude just start swimming? But that dude started losing. We were in the barbershop, and I'm telling you, every black person at that barbershop was screaming at that screen because we were like
nothing else mattered.
We're like, brother, do not trick this off for Michael Phelps. You know what I'm saying? This dude is an American hero. I was like, man, listen, this may be a civil war that happens if we don't win this war, and it better not be because of you, right? Anyway, but going back to it, absolutely, gymnastics, it's really brought people together. Because why? There's something they're going after. We're not thinking about ourselves. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, man, seeing someone be really good, watching them, the other day, Simone Biles, I forgot the other young lady's name, where the lady, I think the girl from Brazil, I think it was, she actually won, and they bowed down to her just because, it's.
And people are crying.
Yes.
Because of how symbolic it is.
Because people are thinking outside themselves. Because here's what's sad. When we actually see people outside of themselves, it taps into something that's way deeper in our souls because we know it's right. And a lot of times today, we have such rare moments of people actually genuinely sacrificing for the betterment of someone else, or willing to do something like that. They didn't have to do that. Those two could have been upset. We got a silver and we got a bronze. Simone Biles, she's like the greatest to ever do it. And she could have said, I should have got a gold medal. But no, she was willing to think outside of herself, and it just does something. And so I think, yeah, I mean, there's something, you know, Olympics, nothing brings America more than the Olympics. You know what I'm saying? It's people who normally want to burn a flag.
Like suddenly we're so patriotic.
That's what I'm saying. People want to burn a flag all of a sudden. Boy, them jokers got flags outside their house.
Whatever you need from me.
Yeah, they're out there swaying, dude. It's like that. I mean, it's just,
but and again, the reason why, back to the relationships aspect, and having a wide range of close relationships, the reason why the United States is so successful in the Olympics is because of the diversity.
Yes,
we have such a wide range of skill sets.
Yeah, we do. And again, you know, you think about this, track athletes don't train solo, they train in groups,
right?
Because there's a mission that's going on, and you know what happens if you're having a bad day, the other person's not, it's going to push you, because if it's just you by yourself, you may shrink, stop, do whatever. But when you're with other people, it pushes you. And you know what happens? You're being challenged. Because why? Because, man, there's other people there, and it's something bigger than yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we can learn from that. And I think that's what we should start learning in our country. And what I hope that doesn't have to happen is a tragedy or us being in some economic really bad situation to where we actually get back to the fact of focusing on this. Because it's the truth. This is the issue right now in the West. We live in a very privileged state. And I'm not talking about white privilege. We just live in a privileged nation. And because you know you live in a privileged nation is when you can argue over stupid stuff. Stuff that doesn't even matter. I mean, people are literally having talk shows on stuff that makes zero sense to be having an argument about. It's because why? We have nothing else to do. Because, again, it's turned into everything. When you start consuming, everything becomes about you. And we've got to get ourselves back to a place that we're willing to sacrifice. When you sacrifice, it makes you focus on the main thing. And I think when we do that, it helps you get out of these extreme places. You know, that's why I like doing things with people who have different political views than I do. People have different views than I do socially. People who, man, you know what? Naturally, I wouldn't hang out with them. Again, I lead a church of a lot of people who honestly, probably 80% of those people I probably naturally wouldn't hang out with. But let me tell you this, some of my closest friends, some incredible people I've got to meet because there's something far greater that we're there to gather for than just ourselves and what we want. Boom. Lauren, you got anything back there today?
I love the Olympics, and I think thinking about third spaces is interesting because that's like the way that New Worlds discovered me was via third space.
It was. Mm-hmm. It was. The local coffee.
Shout out.
Yeah, I'm shouting them out. Now, right across at a local coffee shop that was near us, and so Lauren was working there, and then. Yeah, and I don't even remember how. I think I don't even know how we started getting the conversation.
Probably because you offer everyone a job.
Do I?
If you're like,
if I like
they're
them,
pretty talented.
No, yeah.
Do you need a job?
Yeah, if I like them.
I had no reason to think that I had any skills. I just was there.
No, here's what it was. No, what it was that when we would talk and have conversation, it was like at your age, there was like, you were very much so engaging and you were confident and not like in an arrogance. It was just like, oh no, like I'm gonna, you know, like when I say this, I mean, you're an adult, but like I'm an older man and you're able to like literally hold a conversation in that. And it wasn't where you're like, you know, you're stumbling over your words or whatever. You're like, oh no, you're just very matter of fact or whatever. And I was like, that to me was like, oh, there's a talent that's there. Because there shows that, man, like there is something within you that you were, and again, once I found out more about your family and everything like that, I'm like, oh, she was really raised in such a manner in a way because like you could really engage with someone older, and so that's where I saw that. And then when we start talking more, I was like, oh, I'm really intrigued by what she could possibly do, and then you start telling me what you're thinking about doing and whatever, and so. And then there's always the parts of me when someone is like directionless. I'm like, oh, I want to help you so bad. Like, I really want to help you so bad.
Speaking of mission.
Yeah. I mean,
he will give you one if you need one.
Yeah, because when people do that, I'm like, man, it's a skill set. I'm telling I have to be careful. I mean, because like I could do it all day, every day, just talking to people and just trying to help them. Because I'm like, I know what that's like, not to know like, man. And again, having 8 million different opportunities or which way should I go? and then you're like, oh, I don't know which way I go, and then you get paralyzed or whatever, or maybe you're, people are in a major, especially in a college town. There's so many times I hear people are in a major, and I can't tell you how many times I hear people being in a major, and literally they're talking, oh, what are you going to do? Oh, yeah, I'm in finance. Well, what are you going to do after finance? Oh, I think I'm going to go, work, at Yosemite. You're like, big dog, you could have did that without going to college, right? Now you're about to try to pay off this debt going to work at, out there. It's like, I don't know. It just stuff like that. Just kind of, I really I want to help people, help them find out what they can do, because I think when people can do that, they'll add value to humanity. So. I've heard. What is that? I've heard of it. Yeah, for sure.
Going back to extremism, it's like a political theory that if this is the right and this is the left, there's this, and it's like a line. Mm-hmm. There's this window that can shift towards either side. Yeah. And more extremism on either side shifts the window that way, and the window is like the widely accepted, like socially acceptable beliefs to hold. Mm. Yeah. So in America, you see the window has shifted a lot further to the right. Because or specifically in Florida, I guess, some of the bills that Ron DeSantis has passed, or tried to pass at least, House Bill 999, which gets rid of any funding to any diversity at all. Mm-hmm. It's an extremely radical view. Yep. But was that passed? I don't actually know.
I think it was.
I think it was. Yeah.
Well, even that, I don't even know if it got passed, but it could be passed. Shows that the window has shifted farther right, because that would have just never been something that was logical.
Yeah.
And so I think that understanding political theories or having concepts of them just in your brain make it easier perhaps to think a little bit more critically, but also just make me aware of how difficult it actually is to be a critical thinker when there's so I can't believe. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No.
No, yeah, it makes sense.
It does, because I think what happens is that, and this is another point, why extremism and leaders not living there is because of what happens from there. The reason why, and we all have to be honest about this, the reason why there was such this overcorrection, we live in Florida, overcorrection, was because of a very hard shift for a long time left on some things that were even, personally, that I would disagree with or whatever. But because it was so pushed and so forced at people, then it became, that was the rise of Trump. Why he's here is because people got, it was man, they feel like, man, I'm tired of people telling me I got to think this way, do this. I'm going to rebel against it. And he felt like he was going to be the one to help us do that. So when you live in extremes, you create this other side that gets it all going. But what's really happening, again, across the world is whoever is in power right now, whoever's in power, whether if you're, because that's what people were wondering, is the world shifting? Because some people think, oh, the world's shifting more right. But it actually isn't. It's actually based off, depending on what nation you're living in, based off who sits in power. So it's I think it's in Australia, it went from I think it was more leaning more left, and now it's more right. I think it's maybe in London or in Britain right now that it was more right, and then now it's literally who got elected here, it's more left, and it's kind of going across the globe, because I think it's going to what we talked about. People don't trust authority anymore. And so it feels like authority is all used for themselves. Authority is just creating these factions and things like that. And so anybody, it doesn't matter what side you're on, people are just pushing against it. And so I think that's why extremism is really difficult, because what it does is that it just creates this other side versus actually creating. And what those things don't do, they don't create very good pathways for us to actually move forward. And so anyway. Well, guys, hey, I hope today was actually helpful for you. Here's the deal. What I want to encourage you to do is simply this, is where do you hold extremes in your life? Be honest with yourself. Where do you actually hold extremes? And I want to be really clear. There are certain things that are convictions of yours, values of yours. You should stand on those things. But what I'm also trying to say, too, is that when your values or your thing make you look down on someone, that is when you've gone to an unhealthy place. Because I hold this value, they don't hold this value. You think you're now better than that person. That is when our values and our things begin to get out of whack. But I want to say, where have you gone there? Where has maybe a value or anything has caused you to maybe live in some extreme places? And so I would ask you to look at it, do it, process it. And in our 4 pillars that we talked about, see where you can start adding different things from those 4 pillars to actually help you as a leader live as someone who's not extreme. Because listen, the world is needing of examples of leaders who are actually knowing how to live in this balanced life. Until next time, keep writing the rules.